You buy a brand new car for $40,000. You drive it home, and by this time next year, it is worth about $32,000. You just lost $8,000, and you did nothing wrong. You did not crash it. You did not even drive it much. It simply became a used car the moment you signed. That is not a scam. That is depreciation, and it is the single most expensive thing about owning a car. Nobody puts it on the sticker. Nobody mentions it in the showroom. So let's run the numbers on what a car actually costs over 10 years and settle the oldest question in personal finance: new, used, or lease? First, let's follow one new car all the way through. $40,000. You put 10% down and finance the rest at 6.5% over 5 years. Most people walk into this looking at exactly one number, the monthly payment. They decide they can handle it, they sign, and they stop thinking. That is the mistake. The payment is what the bank charges you to borrow. It is not what the car costs you to own. Those are two completely different numbers, and the gap between them is where your money quietly disappears. Here is what actually happens to the value. A new car loses about 20% in the very first year. Then it keeps bleeding, a little slower each year, but it never stops. After 10 years, your $40,000 car is worth around $13,000. You did not spend that $27,000 on anything. There was no bill. There was no transaction. It simply evaporated while the car sat in your driveway overnight, year after year. That is depreciation, and the reason it destroys people financially is that you cannot see it. No one ever hands you an invoice for the value your car lost this year. Now add the costs you can actually see. Over the 5 years of the loan, that 6.5% interest costs you about $6,000. Insurance, at $1,600 a year, is another $16,000 across the decade. Maintenance starts cheap and gets expensive as the car ages. A few hundred a year while it is young, well over $1,000 a year once the warranty is gone and things start to break. Call it $10,000 over 10 years, and that is conservative. Now stack it all up. Depreciation, $27,000. Interest, $6,000. Insurance, $16,000. Maintenance, $10,000. The true cost of that $40,000 car over 10 years is about $59,000. That is $492 a month, every single month, for 10 years, whether you drive it every day or leave it parked. That is the real number, not the loan payment. This, and look closely at which slice is biggest, because this is the whole game. It is not the loan. The interest everybody worries about is only $6,000. The depreciation is $27,000, more than 4 times as much. The most expensive part of buying a new car is the one part nobody warns you about, the one part that has no monthly bill, and it is at its absolute worst in the first few years after you buy. Which points straight at the answer. If depreciation is the biggest cost, and depreciation is worst in the early years, then the smartest move you can make is to let somebody else eat those early years for you. You let the first owner take the 20% hit, the second year hit, the third year hit, and you step in afterward. That is what buying used actually means. You are not buying a worse car. You are buying the same car after the most expensive part of its life is already over. So let's run the exact same 10 years on a used car. You buy the same model, 3 years old, for $22,000. Somebody else already absorbed that brutal first cliff, the steepest part of the entire curve. You financed $20,000 at 7.5% over 4 years. Used loans cost a little more, and the car is a little older, so let's be fair and count that against it. The value still falls, but gently now, because the steep part is behind it. Over 10 years it drifts down from $22,000 to about $9,500. That is $12,500 of depreciation, less than half of what the new car lost. Interest, on a smaller loan, is about $3,000. Insurance on a cheaper car runs around $1,300 a year. Maintenance is higher, because the car is older the whole time you own it. So let's charge it a full $14,000 across the decade. Add every bit of that up, and the used car costs about $42,000 over 10 years. $355 a month. Compared to the new car, you just saved $16,500 for a car that does the exact same job. It gets you to work. It holds your groceries. It keeps you dry in the rain. The only thing you actually gave up was the smell of the interior and the feeling of being the first person to sit in the seat. There is a sweet spot here, and it is worth naming exactly. A car that is 3 to 4 years old has usually just come off its first lease or its first owner. It has shed the steepest part of the depreciation curve, and it still has years of reliable life left in it. Many of them can be bought certified pre-owned, inspected and backed by a manufacturer warranty, which takes the single scariest risk of buying used, the surprise repair, and puts a cap on it. That is the car you want. Old enough that someone else paid for the cliff, young enough that nothing major has started to go wrong yet. Now the third option, the one that feels the cheapest and is quietly the most expensive of all. Leasing. $450 a month sounds wonderful sitting next to a real car payment. And that low number is exactly the trap. A lease is designed to show you the smallest possible monthly figure, because the dealer knows that is the only number you are looking at. But a lease never ends. Every 3 years you hand the car back, sign again, put down another $2,500, and drive off in a car you will never own. There are mileage limits, and you pay for every mile over. There are wear and tear charges waiting for you at the end, and the payments simply never, ever stop. Over 10 years, that is $54,000 in payments, plus $10,000 in signing fees, plus insurance. $80,000. And at the end of it, you own nothing. There is no car to sell. There is no resale value to recover. You have rented your way through an entire decade of driving, and you are standing in an empty driveway with nothing to show for $80,000. Let's put all three of them side by side. Used, $42,000. New, $59,000. Lease, $80,000. Same 10 years. Same job. Same roads. The most expensive choice costs nearly double the cheapest one, and the person making it usually thinks they are being smart because the monthly number looked small. But a single total can still hide the story, so watch how these actually add up year by year. The lease climbs in a straight, relentless line because it never slows down and never stops. The new car climbs fast early, while depreciation is biting hardest and then eases off in the later years. The used car stays the lowest line on the chart the entire way across. And here is the part worth sitting with. There is no year, not a single one, where leasing ever pulls ahead. It is behind on day one, and it is further behind on the last day. And then there is the part everyone forgets to count. At the end of these 10 years, the used buyer and the new buyer both own something real. $9,500 of car. $13,000 of car. They can sell it, trade it, or drive it for another 5 years for almost nothing. The person who leased owns exactly zero. And that resale value is already baked into every number I just showed you, and buying still is not close. Here is the punchline, the number to actually remember. The gap between leasing and buying used is about $37,000 over 10 years. Now imagine you bought the used car and took that difference, the money you did not hand to a dealership, and simply invested it, month by month, at a normal 7% return. At the end of 10 years, you would have about $54,000. So the real cost of leasing is not $80,000. It is $80,000 plus the $54,000 you never got the chance to build, sitting in someone else's account instead of yours. Now the honest part, because these numbers are always cleaner than real life. Depreciation rates vary enormously by model. Some cars, a few trucks, and a handful of famously reliable brands hold their value far better than this example. Some lose it far faster. A reliable used car is one of the best deals in all of personal finance. But an unreliable one, with a surprise transmission or a blown engine, can erase the entire gap in one repair, so buy carefully and get it inspected. Leasing can genuinely make sense in a couple of narrow cases. If you run a business and write the payments off, or if you truly cannot absorb a surprise repair bill and you need perfectly predictable costs to sleep at night. And if you buy that new car and actually drive it for 20 years instead of 10, the new car looks dramatically better because you finally spread that giant depreciation hit across enough time to make it small. But for most people, doing the most normal thing, driving a normal amount, the math here is not subtle and it is not close. Buy gently used, 3 or 4 years old, past the cliff. Drive it until it genuinely dies. Never lease a car you could simply buy. And whatever the salesman tells you across that desk, remember the one number that is never printed on the window sticker, the number that quietly decides everything. The most expensive part of any car is not the price, and it is not the loan. It is the value falling out of it while you sleep. This is educational content, not financial advice.